Okay, so we're up to Mishlei 16:8. And this is I think this one is a really fundamental pasuk. Okay, I mean I know you could say that about all of them, but I'm curious to see what we get from this. I reviewed my idea from a long time ago. Okay. Yeah, Isaiah.
Is there an S not in this pasuk?
Let's check. Hold on. So what Isaiah's asking is uh there are marks, or there's signs under the and above the letters that tell you how to parse the pasuk. And an asnachta is like a comma or a semicolon, depending on the case. Oh, we got a Hadassah and Rivki. Not Mayan, sorry. Wow, it was small. I didn't see Mayan and Rivki. I think I was just thinking Hadassah because we got something from Lynette office. Okay, so we have Tov Ma'abit Tzedakah. Yeah, comma. Merov tuos below mishpat. Okay, so yeah, who wants to translate?
Um, good. Good
Okay,
is less
so I'll
than
give you a hint
tzedakah.
here. This is Tov blank may blank, which
Oh,
doesn't
okay.
yeah.
Better is a little with righteousness. In
Okay, better for
righteousness.
righteousness. Oh yeah, with or in righteousness. I think those are both. We're gonna really have to do multi translations here. Um, yeah, there's a lot of ambiguity. May rove tevuos below mishpat.
From a lot of produce, produces.
Yeah, produce. Yeah, now just one thing. The whenever you have tov blank may blank, it does not mean from, it means than.
Yeah, Dan.
Right.
Um, so that's me being bad at English.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
then a lot of
Produce. Yeah.
produces
Yeah,
without
I don't know what the difference. I mean, in English we use produce as a, it implies a lot of it,
vegetables.
like multiple. But yeah, yeah. I mean, tuvos. I don't know the difference between tuvo and tuvos, so we'll say a lot of produce.
Yeah, without judgment.
Okay, yeah. So mishpat can mean judgment. Okay, so anyone have any other translations of any other terms here? Because this is fine. I mean, this is good, but I think there are some other things that can be translated in multiple ways.
Well, charity.
Okay, right. So tzedakah could either mean charity or righteousness. Okay, and the only reason I'm putting charity first is just because that's the specific, and then righteousness is the general. Okay, and then mishpat is judgment, or anyone have any other translations of mishpat?
Law.
Yeah, law is good. Law. What else?
Fairness.
Uh, fairness is an interesting one. Yeah, fairness is good. There's one that's very close to judgment, and it kind of parallels righteousness.
Justice.
Justice. Yeah. Okay. Right. So I'm gonna go ahead and lead with that. Okay. So better is a little with or in tzedakah than a lot of produce without mishpat. Okay. So let's go through our minimalist commentaries here. So we have Nobin Sion here. The Targum Sadiagon says, this is the Sadiagon's translation into Arabic, translated back into Hebrew, says bitzedakah means bitzedek, with righteousness. Or with yeah. So he's taking a stance that it means righteousness, not charity. Okay, and then the Targum Ksuvim, the Aramaic translation says Tav Kalil B'tzidkasa means Sagia Da'alalta Delo Vedina. So he translates below Mishpat as without law. Okay, so he takes law. So I'm not going to preserve these because we have them in our translation here. Art Scroll says better a little through righteousness. Okay, we'll add another word, through righteousness, than much produce without justice. Rav Hirsch is better a little with compliance to the law. Okay, so he's translating tzedakah as compliance to the law. That's interesting. Then great revenues. That's a good one, actually. Revenues with injustice. So he phrases it in the positive. I don't know if that's an English translation or a German translation. Alter says better a pittance in righteousness than abundant yield without justice. Yeah. Okay, I'll keep these up here just in case we like them. But I'm gonna actually I'll copy all of these and paste them into the chat. That way we have them. Yeah. one of your someone's going to ask the question that is going to reveal why Alter likes the word pittance. Okay, we'll see it. We'll save that for the questions. Okay, what are the questions here? Very terse pasuk. Yeah, Ayala?
Better in what way?
Okay, so whenever you have a better pasuk, you got to ask better in what way? Yeah, and I guess that could be split into two questions. One is by what criterion, and how is it better, right? It's like, by what value system and what metric, or not metric, how does it boost the metric, whatever you want to say. Yeah, Isaiah?
So me'at, is it me'at tuos, or is it?
Okay, so that's the question, right? So a little of what? And this is why Alter uses the word pittance. So pittance just means a small amount. For some reason in English, if I say better a little, then it begs the question, or even doesn't beg, it raises the question, a little of what? But a pittance just means a small amount. So I think I like the little nuance there. Okay, yeah. So a little of what? Produce or something else? Yeah, and it is strange. I mean, if it's produce, why, I guess, delay saying that until the end, right? The normal way to say it, the normal way to say it would be better a little produce with tzedakah than a lot without mishpat, right? That's like the normal way to say it. You say what nouns, you specify the nouns you're talking about. So yeah. Okay, Rivki and Mayan, or Mayan.
Okay, I guess I'll go.
Yeah.
So we both have. So my question, I think, is similar to two.
Yeah.
But I think it's just more like, what are the actual halves? Like, I'm having trouble. Like, is tzedakah with mishpat, is it produce? Like, I'm not
Okay.
really clear.
So what exactly, oops, I just messed up the font size. So what exactly are the two halves of the pasuk, right? So I'll just clarify this. I know this is what you mean, but I'll just clarify it for the sake of the question here. Is what is the decision in each half?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then Mayan?
Yeah, what's the tzedakah referring to and what's the mishpat referring to?
Yeah,
and is it inherently tied to Tevuot?
Okay, so what does tzedakah mean in this context? And then I'm going to go ahead and add on to this. What does, bit tzedakah? Okay, and I'm not going to write this, but bit in Hebrew is one of the most multi-definition
Ambiguous
prefixes. Yeah, ambiguous prefixes. You can translate it as with, in, through, about, among, all these kinds of things. So what's the preposition, right? So how does the preposition of bet qualify it? Okay, and then the second question Mayan asked, which was, what does mishpat mean in this context? And what does without mishpat mean? Yeah, Isaiah?
So I know we have this type of pasuk in Mishlei, sometimes tov blank may blank.
Yeah.
So does tov have to be just as like a comparator, and we don't know if what it's tov in terms of, or could it be like that it's tov is the quality that it's more in the first half, and it's more tov than like tov could be an actual quality, or it could be like just a comparison word. Like for example, in the first half, like it could have said tzedek me'at, but tzedakah may something is more righteous in the first, but it said tov. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Okay, so I'll tell you what I thought you were saying, but now I'm not so sure. When you elaborated, I thought you were saying, could you translate just the first half as a little bit with tzedakah is good? Is that what you're saying? You're saying something else?
No, I'm saying something else, I think.
Okay. So yeah, I don't understand. I'll tell you what my problem is, and if you can surmount the problem, then good. I don't know any other way to translate tov blank may blank other than saying better this than that, or it is good if this comes from that. And here I'm just automatically eliminating that translation, because you can't say good good a little in tzedakah from produce without mishpat. Like that just doesn't sound.
I guess the alternate way that I would read the pasuk maybe would be like more good is a little bit in tzedakah than a lot of tefillos without mishpat is good. Like it's more, the first half is more good than the second half.
Okay, I'm saying there is more good in a little bit of tzedakah than the good in a lot of produce without mishpat. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the only sticking point here is what do you do with the mem?
Right.
Oh, is that the then? But then more. Yeah, I don't know. I can't explain why this doesn't sit well with me, but it doesn't.
The reason that I is like you don't have to, in order to like compare the quantity in like the first half and second half, you don't have to have tov playing. Like tov doesn't have to be like, you could have used another word and just had mem be there to compare. I don't know. I didn't think about it.
I don't think you can. I think I mean, you could have a more specific thing. Like you could say, for example, let's say, enjoyable. Like you could say a little bit in tzedakah is enjoyable, but the structure of tov blank may blank means better. So I just don't know whether to say that. So I'm gonna keep this on, but cross it out in case someone has a creative way to read it. We had an interesting thing, by the way, where last week in my Wednesday morning, which got pushed to Thursday morning shiur, David Lichter translated a pasuk, and I said grammatically it doesn't make sense and structurally it doesn't make sense, and we came up with reasons why. And then the next day we saw that the commentary attributed to the Radak said exactly what David said. So like, I think it's always good to have experimental translations. And even though I have a stance on it right now, I'm not going to eliminate it. Okay, Ariel.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. One is the second half of the pasuk sounds, pretty obvious here.
Yeah.
Like why?
Okay.
I mean, meaning, of course, like you don't want to do anything without mishpat. Like,
okay.
It's like.
So the second half seems a bit obvious in the world of Mishlei. Obviously, doing something unjust is bad. So the question is, what is the hava amina? And just to translate that question, i.e., what false idea might we have thought such that it is necessary for Shlomo HaMelech to tell us this seemingly obvious fact?
Right. And the other question that I have is, why is the first half of the pasuk like a little vague with what it's talking about?
Yeah, I think I'm going to add that to the stylistic question of a little of what? I mean, that is the vagueness. So I'll just add why the deliberate vagueness in the first half. Yeah. Reza?
Is there like a tipping point here between the two halves? Like how would you measure them? Like how much justice and charity would be to like tip the scales towards the goodness?
Right. So what how does one assess the quantities here, and is there a definite tipping point? That's a good question. Okay, Rivki and Mayan.
So this is like a little similar to the like decision-making aspect, but who is in this pasuk? Are we assuming that everyone could be in this place, or is it like talking to a more specific audience?
Okay, so who is the intended audience of this pasuk? Okay, Alex.
I'm just curious who the intended audience is specifically, like the person who'd be receiving the tzedakah, the person who.
Okay, I'll tack that on to what Rivki just asked here, which is it the person who is receiving the tzedakah, or the giver, or someone in the society? Yeah. And then I'll ask what Rivki said also. Rivki said, like, what kind of person is this addressed to? Yeah. Okay. So you guys were asking different questions. Yeah. Ariel?
Yeah, I guess like what's the subject of the pasuk?
Okay. So this is a very important one here. What is the subject of this pasuk? And I'll just reiterate again because I know I said this in my morning Mishlei shiur, but sometimes you can have a pasuk, and by defining it as one subject, you get one idea, and if you define it as talking about a different subject, you get a completely different idea. So it could be a question that can lead you to ideas, or it could be a question that can like crystallize and clarify ideas at the end. Yeah, Isaiah?
Hi, it's Tamara actually.
Tamara.
So I know you're asking like better in what way, but I guess I don't know if this is a separate question, but like, what about the fact that more produce is usually better?
Okay, good. All right. So it's funny because maybe that is the that's the part of the Havmin in the second half. I'm actually going to tack that onto the second half, okay, which is like, what about the fact that, I guess actually, let me just think if I want to ask this as a separate question or tack it onto here.
I think it's a separate question because I don't think it's obvious.
Okay, all right, sure. Isn't a lot of produce good, and I'll put it in parentheses, and maybe sometimes better than the alternative, right? Like, for example, I don't know, again, without even stating what this pasuk means, like this kind of depend on racist question, but like if you have a country that is starving to death and like in a famine, then maybe a little bit is not good. Maybe you want a lot of produce and save the people, and so maybe there's circumstances under which it's actually, what this question is also. I'm gonna I don't want to hijack your question, but I guess let's say under what circumstances or parameters is this true, right? And is the reverse sometimes true? And I know you weren't fully asking about the reverse of like a lot of produce without mishpat, but I think it's tied to this. Like what were the circumstances? Yeah, Alex.
To tack on to question number 5, who exactly is the justice for?
Oh, great question. Yeah. Okay.
Specific.
To or for whom is this justice? Is this mishpat? I'm going to keep the term mishpat here because we don't know what it means yet. And I'll attack the same question on the tzedakah one. To or for whom is this tzedakah? Yeah. Next is my dad, who I assume can see if he's even though I can't see him, or maybe not. I can't tell. All right. Well, if you have a question, you can interrupt. Okay. Are there any questions we're missing here? Tov me'abit tzedakah mirov to us below mishpat. We asked how much is rov. Yeah, Isaiah or Tamar.
So we're saying that one thing is better than another thing. Why do we say it that way and not just say something is bad? Like,
okay, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Okay. Why are we engaged in this comparison? Why not just say that something is bad? And that actually might open up an answer to the question that Tamara was asking, because maybe the second half is not bad. Maybe it's just not as good as the first half, which sounds funny because we're talking about without mishpat, but I think a lot rides on how we define mishpat here. Yeah. Okay. So this is a different kind of pasuk than we usually have. I think what's different about it is, first of all, there's no mishleic actors here, right? It's not talking about the chacham or the fool or the tzaddik and the rasha. Also, tzedakah and mishpat are really, really fundamental concepts. Arguably present in my two favorite psukim, not arguably, they are present in my two favorite psukim in Nach, which we may or may not have to do the Rambam on like we always do. But let's copy and paste the questions into the chat and then take our thinking minute, and then we'll see what we come up with. So pasting questions in the chat. And I'm going to say here that, my advice, even though there's no method when it comes to thinking, my advice here is decide on on how you're translating tzedakah and mishpat, and then proceed from there, because I think that's going to be the starting point and the division point behind a lot of the ideas. Okay, so let's take our thinking minute and see what we come up with. I'm gonna go ahead and give hints here in terms of like, I think you have to answer that question. I think you have to answer these two questions.
Wait, can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
Did we ask if there is a difference between mishpat and tzedakah? I don't remember.
We didn't ask that. I am just kind of assuming that there is a difference, but it's a fair question. I'll say, is it possible? I'm gonna ask the question in a way where it's showing that that's like a non-traditional reading. Is it possible to learn this pasuk to be using tzedakah and mishpat synonymously? Yeah, I'm just to me it's just improbable that the Torah or that the Tanakh would ever do that. We also didn't ask what is the practical application.
Did we ask what mishpat was?
Yeah, that's one of the ones I highlighted.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right, I see. Got it.
Okay, let's see here. Let's think for a little bit more. We also didn't ask better for whom. For whom or for what? Okay, Isaiah, you're up.
All right. So I think this is interesting because the way I'm going to explain this, it's not really like comparison on a scale. But okay, so I'll get there when I get there.
Okay.
It's better. I'm saying that it's better to have a little bit of gain. Like let's say it's, a harvest or something like that, where you engage in it, I guess, like you give tzedakah with it, you gained it in a righteous manner. I actually haven't like decided on that exactly.
Okay, sure.
That it's better for you as a person than to get a large, let's say to get like a large crop and not give like tzedakah on that thing, to not engage with it in like the just way that you're supposed to, which is in that case giving maaser. But in other cases where you're getting like, you have like a windfall at work, like maybe also giving tzedakah. But like when you have like a large influx of wealth, like to not engage with that, gets through tzedakah, is like, it's bad for you because you're relating to that wealth in like a negative manner. You're viewing it maybe as like you produced it yourself.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that has a negative consequence. So I think the reason is tov. There's no case in which it's still good to get a lot, but not have but engage in it without mishpat. The reason it says it's tov may this is because it's like you have a havamina, a large havamina that it's great to get a lot of stuff. But no, it's better to even have just a tiny bit, but you treat it with tzedakah than to get a lot and to like totally forgo that.
Okay, I like that idea. Let me try typing it out. So it's better for you as a as a person to receive a little bit of something, for example, produce, and to engage it with tzedakah. And I'll include the possibilities here. Giving tzedakah, obtaining it through tzedakah, whatever it is, then to acquire a lot of something and not engage with it justly. This is almost doing what Ariel was suggesting to do, which is it's not this idea. I don't think is really. I think you're right to like lead with the vagueness. Like I don't even know if it's using tzedakah and mishpat in the same way in different ways here. It might just be like in the proper way. Let's say in the proper way. The reason Shlomo needs to tell you this is that there are cases in which people believe that massive quantities of good are ultimately going to be worth it, even if they can't, do the right thing with it. As if like the abundance offsets the personal detriment of not behaving justly with it. Okay, so now just to push it a little bit further here, and this is not just for Isaiah, this question is for everyone. Question is like, why? Okay, and I think if we have a concrete example, I mean, I know Isaiah was like suggesting particularly, suggestions of examples, but if we have like a concrete example we could work through, then I think that would help us here. So anyone, I guess if you want to use the party signal, you can, or you could just jump in.
I was thinking of one just because at first I
Sure.
was using it. I was like trying to concretize for myself.
Yeah.
And I think if you just think of like just wealth in general, like money, if you are giving charity with like the little money that you have, then you probably end up feeling more fulfilled and you feel like you're going somewhere with the money that you've acquired and you feel like you're like living purposefully. But like you hear about a lot of these like millionaires that actually like reach a level of depression, and a lot of it's because they just keep on trying to acquire and acquire and acquire, and they're not like doing things with it. They're not being purposeful and intentful with it.
Yeah.
Like charity.
Okay, so I think that what you're saying is true, that a person will feel more fulfilled with using even a little bit of money for tzedakah than the like meaninglessness that can come with extreme success. It strikes me as a very, and this is not a rejection of the idea, but it strikes me as a very like, modern American way to relate to the pasuk, as if like the thing that we're looking for is fulfillment. I would much prefer to take Isaiah's approach of there's some objective good, not just the feeling we get from it. And I understand that a feeling of fulfillment and a feeling of existential void can affect a person's life, like for the good or for the bad. But I would like to like, I guess we see Mishlei advocating, for example, good midos, or a good way of relating to an accurate way to like frame it in terms of knowledge. And in fact, now that I remember, Isaiah did say that. He said, I'm just gonna write this before I forget. I still want to hear other answers though. Is if a person gets a small amount of money, but recognizes that that money, comes from Hashem, so then he will be reinforcing a true understanding of the world and his place in it. Whereas if a person gets a ton of money, but doesn't acknowledge that it's from Hashem, okay, by giving tzedakah, I should have said that earlier, then it's arguably worse, because he's going to he's going to imagine that his own might and strength made this wealth, which will lead him to all sorts of bad Mishleic ends. Okay, anyone else have any other examples of this? Again, I don't think it's one idea. I think the way that it is casting a large net. Yeah.
I think this is in the same vein, but like I was thinking about someone who like grows a field of crops, and the difference between whether you leave peah, lafet, shicha, you give the presents to the poor people that you're supposed to give from your field, or if you don't, is like a massive difference of like do you relate to this field as something that like is like yours and like you grew it and so therefore you deserve all of it, or do you see it as like it came from God and like a certain part is yours and a certain part goes to like those who God determined that that it goes to.
Right. That's good. I want to take a brief moment to to bring up and shoot down a classic Hasidic story. Okay. And something about the way Isaiah was saying it was like saying the original idea, something was like, there's that story, it's funny, it's a Hasidic story, it's also a Jesus story, right? Is the drummer boy, right? of the person in the shul. You've got shul, usually it takes place in Yom Kippur, and everyone's saying all these like tefillos, and then like the little boy comes and he either plays his drum or like plays his flute or whatever, and then everyone like shuts him up, and then the Rebbe says like, no, his sincere offering to me means more than like all of your prayers, so like that idea is true if you're talking about doing tzedakah and the recognition that everything comes from Hashem. Like I think a person who like a person who gets like $5 and gives tzedakah from it, that could mean a lot more than a person who gives $5 million, or whatever, but like doesn't recognize that all the money comes from Hashem, So I think in the realm of tzedakah, that really, really works. In the realm of Tefilah, it doesn't. Tefilah is a very specific kind of activity. You can't just like play a flute and like, substitute for it. So that was kind of a tangent on what Isaiah was saying. Okay, I like this idea. And I have a feeling that when we read the meforshim, there are going to be a lot of meforshim that either overlap this or intersect with it. So I think this is a good approach. Okay, next is Alex.
So I'm running with the translation that Rav Hirsch's.
Yeah.
And I thought of it from the framework of business. Specifically, it's better to like have a business that's like maybe not thriving, but you're running your business in an ethical and moral way versus kind of like getting an abundance of profit and wealth off of a business that's being run through unjust practices like not paying your workers or anything within those kind of realms.
Okay, that's a good interpretation.
Business practices.
Okay, good. That is a good interpretation. Now the question is why? Okay, and this is very mishleically basic, I think, but I think we need to talk it out. So what makes that better? And again, a question for everyone, not just Alex.
So Matt.
Yeah.
Hi. So I had a thought about this. It's like not quite so much of just like, well, have good business practices, but like the effect on a person of, kind of getting a lot through this, let's say, shortcut way makes it very hard to do the right thing, right? It's like a slippery slope. Like, okay, so maybe the first time he wasn't so careful, but it worked out. And really looking back, there wasn't any like, oh, I don't see any issues. But then when it becomes like a grayer area, or, we know the slippery slope can, when people are actually like, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss out on this opportunity because, I see these issues kind of starting to, come up, these issues of like, oh, should I be doing this or not? And then you're like, oh, well, I never check these things,
Yeah. Okay. That's a good interpretation. I'm pairing it with Alex's, but I don't know if it's a different idea, but it's definitely a really good idea here. So you're saying that basically, the emphasis is not on really what you have, but the amount that you get. And like that influx of wealth, if you have a small influx of wealth that comes about through tzedakah, I'll state this in the positive also. Conversely, if you have a small influx of wealth or a small, I guess, profit, if you obtain a small profit through ethical practices, this will reinforce your commitment to those values, because you got a good result, even if it's comparatively small, and you can recognize the systemic and personal benefits of behaving ethically.
Oh, I think it's even different than that. I think that even getting a small amount it's like a certain amount of self-control. In other words, I'm okay with a small amount because I know that I got it, and I also checked that I did things in a way. I checked these other things. I looked into these issues, versus like, oh, I'm going to put those aside and I'm going to just focus on how do I get the biggest gain. And in other words, I think because it's something in the language, it doesn't seem like, oh, I know this is not okay, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm going to make a lot. It seems almost like, are you considering those issues?
Yeah.
So, I'm saying
That's
like
really
once
good.
someone gets a lot and they've dispensed with or like kind of pushed the issue of, you know, the justice of what they're doing aside, it makes it very hard to go back and do things in a different way.
Yeah, I'm gonna add that point of the point of no return here. And you can quickly get to a point of no return where you just, you know, let the status quo operate and throw up your hands and say, well, that's how I do things, you know, or something of that nature.
Right. And then, or like you have to be like, I'm gonna miss out on this huge opportunity. Like you get used to the big gains, you know,
Right.
versus like, okay, you know what, this isn't so kosher. I want to stay out of this.
Yeah.
And I'm okay. Like I'm used to like stepping back and maybe not making the big kill.
Yeah, that's a really, really good idea. I feel like a good example, I feel like we're still talking in the abstract. So could we, if anyone has a good example, yeah, Rifki or Mayan?
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, if you look at companies that are exploited later on for doing something like unethically, the bigger the company, the harder they usually take a hit also.
Yeah.
So I feel like that could also be something here. Meaning, like, if you have a small business, like support local businesses and it's like a nice little business, we love that. But then if you have like a big company that's found to do something wrong, like usually it's a lot harder to recover.
That's a good point. Yeah. Alex, you had an example or something to add?
Yeah, I think there's also an element of oftentimes there's this false belief that it doesn't matter how you acquire your wealth, as long as when you have that wealth, you like give tzedakah and do all these good things with it. But I think there is this like element, like it's not enough to give tzedakah once you have wealth. You have to acquire that wealth in a way that is in line with tzedakah and
okay, that's also
mishpat.
good. Yeah, so let's see here. I'm just gonna hold on a second. I'm just gonna add this here. There's a common, you know, rationalization that it doesn't matter how you get your wealth as long as you give tzedakah afterwards. Okay, and I'll give it here's a real example. I mean, from what I understand, Bernie Madoff gave a lot of tzedakah, right? So, but obviously he did not value actual tzedek, right? So, in truth, you know, the tzedakah that a person like that gives might do good, but it's not stemming from an actual internal value of tzedakah, because if it did, he wouldn't rationalize like that. You know, that is like, I don't know, like that to me, that would be like if a person, you know, I'm gonna use something with intrinsic value to just as to exemplify this. But like if a person said, you know, if you had a guy in the medical industry developing like some new medication and said, well, I am going to, you know, I don't know, round up a bunch of homeless people and experiment on them. And it doesn't matter how many of these people we kill, because we're going to develop a medicine that's going to be good for everyone. You know, it's really good for life. Like, I would say, you know, I don't think even if you actually did that, even if you actually like developed a medicine that's good for life, you don't value life if you're just killing people to like get it, you know, like there is an intrinsic thing. So same thing here when it comes to mishpat. If you are stealing and being unethical and harming people in order to, and justifying it by saying, well, I clearly value these things because look, I'm giving tzedakah with the wealth that I earn. No, you don't. You're just being hypocritical. You know, you don't actually value it. And again, the reason why I'm saying that wealth that you're giving, Bernie Madoff's money, you know, did help people. I mean, it also hurt a lot of people when in certain cases. But like, it's not about whether you help or hurt. It's about your relationship to that value. You know, you are not a tzaddik if you are using unethical means to get money and then you give it to tzedakah. Yeah. Okay. Anyone want to add to this approach? I think this is also good. Okay, Ayala.
Okay, so I'm going to say that better in the sense of like longer lasting and more permanent.
Yeah.
And I was going to say tzedakah as like making sure that everyone has their needs taken care of. And that like without justice is that, so if you have whatever wealth you have, and you, with tzedakah is how I was reading it, and you like engage in it with tzedakah, and you make sure with that wealth everyone is having their needs, it's going to last a really long time. Because otherwise, if it's without justice, then people will end up needing to, like, if people don't have their needs taken care of, they're going to need to go to extreme measures to get that, and it's going to end up harming you and the rest of society, and it won't last.
Okay, so it'd be good for the rest of for the long-term health of the system. But if you don't ensure that people's needs are met, so then they'll have to obtain those needs in ways that might not be good, and their lack is going to have a detrimental effect on the system, and neither will be good for its longevity. Yeah, so this is where I thought Alex was going with her first idea, that the longevity of the thing, like people, the only thing that a person wants once they make money is to keep making money. But if you are shooting yourself in the foot by engaging in unethical business practices, which are either going to risk, being caught or collapsing because you're misusing the resources in the system, then you're not going to be able to continue making money. So like for the longevity of it, then it's bad to engage in these practices. I'm just going to add that as a note here. Note, it is also bad for the sake of the long-term viability of your practices. Yeah. Okay. Rivki, or am I on?
Yeah, you got it right. So I think that what I was thinking is kind of similar to actually a combination of Isaiah and Alex, but I guess we'll see. So I was thinking about it in terms of tzedakah being justice. I'm sorry, righteousness, and then mishpat being, I think, justice. I'm not sure about that half as much. But I think like the frame of the pasuk, I was thinking about it through a scarcity mindset, that the pasuk is saying that it's like going against that. I think a lot of us have that. Like, I don't know if it's like a Jewish thing or a person thing, but like that this idea like, oh my gosh, like I need to have this amount or else like it's really going to be bad. But this pasuk is coming to tell us like, no, like if you like achieve what you have through righteous means, even if it's not a lot, at the end of the day, it's going to be better for you because in two ways. Number one, you're improving your character through doing it, like similar to what you were saying before. And number two, it's also going to stop that mindset from like, I guess, getting even worse and like becoming a very negative character trait to have, because it really can affect you negatively.
Okay, so I want you to elaborate a little bit on that. So I just want to write this down though, and also helps you to chip away at the negative scarcity mindset. So how does relating to the little that you have through tzedakah, through righteousness, accomplish that? First part I get.
You're saying how does specifically doing it through righteousness help with the like realizing that scarcity is like a bad thing, like that mindset?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
I think I have an answer to that actually. Give me 1 second here. So let's just say how. Okay, so I'm gonna go out on a limb here. So the more focused you are on true tzedakah, which is supplying the needs of those who are in need, the more attuned you'll be to objective, to your own objective needs, and the objective resources in the system, then instead of being in an imagination driven, want based value system, and and that will like ease the panic, you know, like I had a I was talking with someone a few years ago about, I mean, you know, this was actually during COVID. I think it was actually when I lost the job at Shalhevet, you know, or when Shalhevet closed. I didn't lose the job, the school closed. But when Shalhevet closed, and like I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing for my future, and I was talking with someone who was not in a similar position, but like he was, I think, moving out into the work world, and we both were sharing like these anxieties about you know, earning a living, and like, you know, we had this simultaneous recognition, and I'm, you know, obviously I'm saying this with gratitude. I am not going to starve. Like, you know, I am, you know, there are people in the world who are on the brink of poverty. Unless something disastrous happens to the entire economy, you know, which can happen. Like if I didn't, again, put yourself in COVID mentality when the school that you've been working at for 10 years closes and you don't know what you're going to do, you know, I just had to remind myself, like, I'm not going to starve, you know, and then that helped me focus on what the objective resources are. Like there are places I can live. There is food that I have access to. I have talents. I have strengths. I am hireable, you know, and so I think that thinking about tzedakah, like if you're actually doing the mitzvah of tzedakah and assessing people's needs and giving to them based on those needs, and then assessing what your income is and looking at your own, it is going to help dissolve or like you know, develop you out of that scarcity, the unhealthy scarcity mentality. Focusing on
exactly.
on God opening his hand and giving us, you know, and providing for every living being. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. I just have a question on it, because I was saying, like, it might not necessarily be a contradiction, but I was saying tzedakah as like specifically righteousness as opposed to charity. Like I was
okay,
thinking,
yeah, right. You're right. I didn't realize I drifted into that. Yeah.
I mean, I still think that it's like a nice idea and it works.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more that like making sure that you're going about your like acquiring whatever you're acquiring in a righteous manner, as opposed to you know, what's the opposite of righteousness? I don't know. Really bad. I can't think. It's
unjust.
Yes,
evil. Yeah, right. Yeah, you know, I talked myself into saying that I think giving tzedakah fits in better with this idea. I have to now think, if you are, I mean, you're pairing it with Isaiah's idea does work better in terms of righteousness. I'm just gonna leave this as an open-ended question here, open-ended, I guess unresolved, unresolved question, which is, does this idea work better with righteousness or charity? Yeah, let's leave it open. I think there's room for both. Okay, Reza, a lot of ideas tonight. Yeah.
So in an effort to tie better being like true knowledge and true understanding, I would say better is like, it is better to understand the true value of what we have, and for it to be a little than to have a lot and have no idea what the value is. So if a person puts if the effort a person puts into acquiring their wealth or resources is equivalent to like the actual value of the resources, then they have a better understanding of like what is true in the world. And if someone who like doesn't work for what they have or like acquires it some other way, or in a bad way, then like they are poorer in understanding. So I'm gonna attempt to I would attempt to define tzedakah as like righteous struggle. So like the work, like righteous work. And then the understanding of how fortunate that person actually is by like knowing that they earned what they got, is like the good. And then, okay.
No, go ahead.
Okay. And then, mishpat could be like, proper judgment.
Okay. Hold on just one second. I think there is
Okay.
in Tefilah, that this reminds me of. Yeah.
You weren't writing anything, so I thought I was like so totally far off.
Oh, no. No, sometimes I write as I go if I immediately catch the current, and sometimes I have to listen to the whole thing. Mituka shanas ha'oved ima advim harbe yochel v'hasava le'ashir einenu meniach lo lishan. Now, this might not be the exact idea, but the sleep of a laboring man, meaning a person who like works, literally a worker, is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of the rich will not allow him to sleep. This is also by Shlomo HaMelech. So I don't know if this is exactly the same idea, but I think it's a similar thing, which is that I'm gonna try putting this into words now. Is if you do, I guess, what they call like honest work, okay, meaning
If you have the proper conception of how your work like correlates to value in the real world, like you're better off because you have a more proper understanding or true understanding of like the value of what you're doing. But if you haven't worked for what you have, then you're poor in understanding. So I define better, like the good, to be like proper understanding of value in the world.
Okay, but if there is an disproportionate, that's the word, disproportionate relationship between what you're doing and what you're producing, and you lose that sense of clarity, then what's the consequence that you were highlighting?
So you would be poorer in understanding. Like that would be the second part of it. So that would be like the harm, basically. So better is like you have better understanding if you are working and you're getting produce or goods that is equivalent to your work. And then the harm would be if you have a lot without like proper judgment, then you're like
there is a different translation of judgment here. I'm just trying to think what would be the best translation of judgment here. Because there is a translation of judgment that means like proper evaluation, which I think fits better. Like accurate evaluation of what you're doing. I don't know if this is a good example of this, but when Mark Zuckerberg invented Facebook, then it started off as something small and then quickly like took on a life of its own. And there was so much emphasis on just growing what it was capable of that they didn't realize how much they were changing the landscape of everything and how people evaluate themselves and what identity is and what the attention economy, and like it spiraled out of control in that the only focus was on just getting the quantity of more and more and more without actually stopping and pausing and saying, well, what exactly are we accomplishing here? What are we trying to do? How is this changing things? Same thing is happening in AI right now. And this could happen with people making fantastic wealth also, winning the lottery, a lot of examples of this. Yeah, that seems like a good idea. See, this is where, by the way, I just want to advertise Ariel's question here. This is where the question of what is the subject of the pasuk comes in very handy, because I think some of these ideas are the same subject, but some of them are completely different. Like, like Reza's idea is not about, ethics in business. It's about your conception of what your place is in the world as a value producer, or how you're using the world. I mean, I don't exactly know how to say it, but it would help to ask that question. Okay, let's keep going. We got a lot more ideas here. Yeah, Ariel.
Yeah, it's funny because I thought Rifki and what you just said might be kind of what I was saying, but but Rifki, I think she veered off a little bit, but
okay, go ahead.
But I want to say that like the subject of the pasuk has to do with you working through tzidkis versus versus giving tzedakah or like whatever, being ethical, well, no, you are being ethical, but I mean, like, it's better to make a little, I'm gonna say it's better to make little produce through acting righteously, because it's bettering yourself as an individual. You're focused on your own perfection, versus making, and the totally opposite extreme is you're making a lot of produce without even taking the law into consideration. You're just it's funny, the one question that I had is like, why not use the opposite of tzedakah, like on the second half, like why say without mishpat as opposed to with like rishis, that's what's bothering me, and like I still don't have a good answer for it. It's kind of saying, oh, without mishpat, because mishpat, in a sense, it's kind of like a positive word, but without mishpat. I don't know why, but even if you do work, using mishpat, and you deal with like the standard, like the norm, you're not necessarily like bettering yourself as a person. You're just doing what everyone else is doing. But if you challenge yourself and doing what is right, even at your own cost, might, will better you as an individual. I even remember Rav Pesach mentioning to me, like, there are two areas of, there are two areas that, like, gets you more perfected: going into business and learning Pirkei Avos or something like that. Because like when you're in business, you're always forced and faced with all these crazy situations that will really test your ethics.
Okay. And tremendous opportunity, therefore, to work on your middos and ethics. Okay, yeah. For the whole first part until that very end, I thought you were basically just repeating Isaiah's idea, which is they are related, so I'm going to pair them. But yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, Sarah, if you're there, can't talk.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I had
Okay.
to get closer to my phone.
Yeah.
Okay, so I missed the very beginning, so it's possible this is repetitive. I'm not sure. But especially when you were talking about, sometimes people might want to like offer justification, like, okay, like maybe I'm not being, I don't know, so honest in business dealings, or maybe I'm like stretching lines or blurring boundaries. But I'm giving, tzedakah, but it's like saying better to give, like that would be like their justification for like, I don't know. And also like sort of sometimes there's this like perception between like Jews versus non-Jews, right? Like, okay, with Jews, I'm forced to deal, but with Jews, I could, I don't know, lines or stretch boundaries or, do things that are, not, I don't know, 100% legal, but the justification is like, okay, but I'm giving a lot of tzedakah, or a lot of Jewish children will benefit, or something like that, like I'm accessing government benefits, but I'm not using them for the extent that they're intended, but I'm doing a lot of chesed with it, or I'm giving a lot of tzedakah. But I would look at the second half and be like, no, better to have less, or to give less tzedakah, but to have justice and for it to be right. And I sort of think that maybe it's preferring, mishpat, not just when you're dealing with Jews, but like when you're dealing with the whole world.
Right.
Like Jews and non-Jews alike.
Yeah. All right.
Or all of society.
So the right. So I phrased it this time. The people use their righteous ends to justify the unjust means, and the pasuk is saying that the only thing that matters is the actual practice of righteousness and justice. And the amounts are really secondary, not the other way around, right?
Right. It's not a justification. Well, okay, we'll have more tzedakah, or we'll have more fun. That's not like the way we're supposed to operate. I guess it goes back to that scarcity mentality also, where, and also I think sometimes when people are, whether it's 100% illegal or when they're stretching those boundaries, that's sort of where people go to, like their justification is like, well, I'm going to give a lot of tzedakah, I'm going to do a lot of good with this money.
Right.
Like people naturally, you're not talking about people who maybe like they don't mean to be, like they're not evil, or they're, you know what I mean? Like their quote unquote intentions are good, even if they're actually, questionable. So that's could be what the message is trying to focus on, like refocus us on.
Yeah, good. I just added here, this is a seductive rationalization because their intentions are genuinely good, or can be, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That they, genuinely want to do good, and this is how they think that they'll be able to gain the means to be able to do so. Yep.
Give me 1 second. I think it's a good idea. I just want to see if I want to say this idea. No, I'm not going to say the idea. It's not relevant. Okay, good idea. All right. I think we're up to Ben.
Hi. Okay, so I think other people sort of touched on what I want to say a little bit, but not quite exactly. So to me, maybe tzedakah is righteousness, right? But righteous in terms of what is right. So if you have a rule or yardstick that you measure being right with, right? So then if you're mindful to that, and you are, okay, because you're discerning, right? Mishpat is also to discern between good and bad, right? And right, the the Shotim and the courts, right, have to discern and make judgment between what's right and not right. So if you're focused on that correct principle, whatever it is, even if you can only do a little, you're mindful, and you only either do a little or get a little or are able to give a little, whatever that littleness is, that may be better and more quality in some ways, and more fulfilling to your purpose, than to just hoard stuff and get whatever you can, and it's just not it's not quality. It's not focused on the rules. So without the the discerning rules, just taking whatever you can get or doing whatever you can do, flailing about is I'm principled now. Thank you. So right, so that is less good than the better good, which is having something more principled.
Okay, I hear the way you're taking each side. I think the thing I'm slightly not clear about is better in what sense. I heard at one point you say it's like more fulfilling, but I wasn't sure when you were describing the opposite side if I missed what you meant by that. So what better in what sense?
So it could be better in a number of different senses. It could be better in the sense of like, when somebody's unfocused and hoarding different, let's say, produce or product, right? So then it's more taxing in all sorts of ways. You have to have more money, more storage, more space, more organization, more mind space, more emotional space, all of those things which are taxing on you. Whereas, first of all, you can get again more quality and be more satisfied perhaps with the quality of the things that the smaller things that came through a principled or mindful approach to what was being done or what was being accomplished.
Okay.
Yes, when Ben mentioned this, I'll just, what he made me think of was, let's say like books, or time reading.
Yeah.
Like if you are in that sense of being, because he used the word discernment, like being selective.
Yeah.
Versus like, oh, it's like whatever, going through, oh, I like this one. You go into like a thrift store, everything's 99 cents, and you end up with like a lot of books. But like if you spend your time, like you said, like whatever you have, like an objective, and let's say who you read and when, what topics you're going to have, and mindful of, let's say, whatever else you have on your reading list for the year and what your purposes are, in the sense of like, I don't know, maybe it is in so far as your own productivity versus just, ending up with rooms full of books that you
Right.
or
Okay.
reading stuff that's a waste of time.
Yeah. The way I'm wording it right now is I don't know if this fully captures what you're saying, but it's better in the sense that you will have a framework which determines how to relate to the wealth that you earn, and what to do with it and how much to pursue, etc., as opposed to the unprincipled person who is just focused on more, but doesn't have a way to relate to what to do with it, with all this. So this answers Ariel's question, which is why it doesn't use the word unjustly. It uses the word without justice, because the essence, according to Ben's idea, is you just don't have principles that you're using to relate to the thing. Not that you're doing it illegally or unethically. You're doing it just without mishpat. Yeah. Okay, that's a good idea. I think this corresponds to one of the approaches of the meiri, which we'll see in a moment. Yeah, Rivki, you got another one?
No, I just was wondering if like the way that I was thinking about it after we spoke about the idea, like the question I had would potentially be good to answer my question.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it will, because I was thinking maybe you can say that righteousness is like another, not like synonym, but I feel like righteousness and just like objective reality kind of go hand in hand, because I feel like without objective reality. Without like righteousness, there isn't real objective reality. So I was thinking like in that sense that through like righteousness, then you'll see the objective reality, which is similar to what you were saying, but with a focus on righteousness as opposed to tzedakah, like charity tzedakah.
Okay, that's good. You'll see the objective reality. Yeah, that's kind of like I was saying for Isaiah with the or what Isaiah was saying with the recognizing where the wealth comes from and everything like that. Yeah. Okay. All right, so let me do this. Okay. We have a lot of ideas here. Okay, let me quickly review the Rambam's definitions of tzedakah and mishpat, which I think everyone needs to know. And then I'll read you the idea that I came up with years ago when I wrote this up. And then I want to go through the meiri, and then we'll call it a night. Okay. There's a lot of ideas here. Okay, so I'm going to read from the new translation of the Mishnah Torah, not Mishnah Torah, the More Nevuchim, which is the Goodman translation. I have not previewed this, but his translation has been good. So he says, this chapter defines 3 terms I need to explain. This is in 353. Chesed, mishpat, and tzedakah. Okay, usually translated as kindness, justice, and righteousness. In my commentary on Avos 5:7, I explained that chesed connotes going to extremes in some way, usually for someone. This, as we know, can mean benefiting someone who has no claim on one, or helping one who has a claim, but doing more than is deserved. Okay, so in other words, chesed means excess or more, and it is defined either by you don't owe this person anything and you're doing something good for them, or you owe them something but you're doing more than you owe. Okay, biblically, chesed most often involves benefits answering to no prior claim. Okay, so pure chesed. So every favor bestowed by God is called an act of chesed, as in the Lord's favors I shall recount. And the whole world being given by God is a work of grace, as it says the world is built by grace, chesed, meaning that God made the world as an act of grace, as he said in proclaiming his attributes, Rav Chesed, abundant in chesed. Okay, now chesed was not our topic, but I can't read tzedakah and mishpat without chesed. Okay, now tzedakah. The word tzedakah derives from tzedek, justice, which means giving everyone his due, treating all beings as they deserve. But meeting your obligations in this basic sense is not what the Torah calls tzedakah, just paying a worker's wages or repaying a debt. Tzedakah is what virtue demands in your treatment of others, like healing the hurts of all who are broken. So of returning the pledge to the poor by nightfall. It says, this will be a tzedakah to you. For a life of moral virtue gives your rational soul its due. You have given it what it deserves. Every moral virtue is called tzedakah. So it says of Abraham, he trusted in God, and this was counted tzedakah in him, referring to the virtue of loyalty. It will be tzedakah in us carefully to keep all this command. Okay, so let's review again. So chesed, actually, I'm gonna review it all. I'll type it on the thing. And then mishpat is the short one. Mishpat means justice at law, giving those judged the reward or retribution they deserve. Okay. In short, chesed denotes gratuitous favor, tzedakah doing good for virtue's sake, improving the soul, while mishpat may call for reward or retribution. Okay, so the summary here is Rambam on in the Mora 353. So you've got chesed, which is benefiting someone who has no claim on you, or benefiting someone in a measure greater than their claim. Okay, tzedakah is giving someone their due and treating every being as it deserves to be treated. Okay, and then for people, this means acting ethically towards another person, because that gives your rational soul its due. Okay, and my understanding of that, in short, again, we're not delving into this chapter in the More Nevuchim, is in reality there is no difference between you and any other human being in terms of an essential difference. Like there are particular differences, but you are a tzelem created b'tzelem Elokim, just like any Jew or non-Jew. So there's no real intrinsic difference between you and them. So if you have the ability to help them, why should you not? So whenever you do help them and you recognize that common humanity, then you are giving your soul what it deserves. It's true you're giving material benefit to this other person, but you're also simultaneously doing tzedakah to your soul by acting in accordance with its dictates, which is the recognition that everyone is fundamentally equal. Okay, and then mishpat is how did he say it again? Justice at law, giving those judged the reward or retribution they deserve. Okay, giving the reward or retribution in accordance with the law. So I really like, I know I've said this before, but Rabbi Jonathan Sachs calls this, I say Rabbi Sachs's terminology, he calls tzedakah distributive justice, and mishpat is retributive justice. Okay, so so that is the Rambam's definition here. Okay, so I had this idea again. I don't know when I came up with this. Probably in the mid 2000s, and it was based on those two definitions. Let me scroll down and read my 4-sentence summary. So I wrote, okay, tzedek means providing every existing thing with what is proper for its existence, and mishpat refers to the administration of justice in a legal system. In order to succeed in any area, it is necessary to align oneself with tzedek to the greatest extent possible. Working with nature will undoubtedly be more successful than working against nature. I'll give examples in a little while. Although it is possible in theory to simply align oneself with tzedek without utilizing a system of mishpat, it is not possible in practice. Thus, a person only has two choices: to align oneself with tzedek via mishpat and to succeed, or to disregard mishpat, which will ultimately lead to a loss of tzedek, which will ultimately result in a lack of success. Okay, so I'll use a kind of a weak example, but I think it's just one that people can relate to, you know, getting in shape. Okay, so the body works in certain ways and doesn't work in other ways. And if you want to bring success to yourself to get healthy, then you need to engage the body as it was designed. Okay, that is tzedek. Okay, oh, sorry, I forgot one fundamental move here. Hold on just a second here, or I made a mistake. Just 1 second. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna say the idea and the example, and then we gotta go back and make sure I'm not projecting into the pasuk. So in order to have bodily health, you need to relate to the body with tzedek, meaning you need to give to each part of the body what it needs and what it is designed to have, you know? So the body needs certain nutrients, you need certain amount of exercise, you need whatever it is, okay? But the thing is you the ideal way to do it is through mishpat, is through a system of like a rigid fixed, I don't mean fixed like you can't change it, but a systematic way of implementing the tzedek, okay? And the temptation is to say, well, I will just try to engage in the thing based on its natural properties without mishpat. And theoretically that's possible, but human nature is such that we're not disciplined. You know, we don't, we get lax, we cut corners, we don't, we make exceptions. And what ends up happening if you don't use a system of mishpat is the whole thing falls apart. You know, you end up losing the system, and then you can't relate to the thing through tzedek anymore. So what it's saying is it's trying to condition you. Yeah, see, this is where this is what probably happens when I quote an idea from years ago. I think what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to inject mishpat into the first half and tzedakah into the second half. I'm saying here in the second half, hold on a second, my reading. So the second half is saying, then a lot of produce without mishpat, because that will lead to failure in tzedakah. No, that's not what I'm saying. Hold on just a second. I'm trying to tap into this old idea from before. Okay, it's a common stylistic thing in Mishlei where they'll give you one piece of the idea in the first half and the second piece in the negative in the second half. So I think what I'm trying to say here is you need tzedakah and mishpat. Okay, so tzedakah means relating to the thing based on how it's designed, and mishpat is a system for doing that. So the first half is really saying better a little bit through tzedakah and mishpat than a lot of produce without tzedakah or mishpat, you know? And so what it's saying is the small scale engagement of the world based on how it's designed through a small scale system is ultimately going to lead to better results than just getting a whole influx of good without worrying about trying to engage in tzedakah and mishpat. And a good example of this is in agriculture, where if you try to just like grow as much as you can from a field, you'll end up depleting it. Whereas if you have a system of like crop rotation, you'll replenish the soil and give each crop what it needs, and it'll have a lasting effect. So this is what I really wanted to say here is in this idea is it's how to relate to anything. And it's saying that it's better in the sense that you'll have success in whatever you're trying to produce. Not better for you ethically and personally. I mean, that might be true, but it's really better in terms of the results. Any thoughts on that or clarifications? Yeah, Mayan?
Yeah, so I guess like a question on this would be like in this like organizational way to get to use the tzedakah. I don't know if I right terminology there, but like the mishpat there, would that be referring to the Torah as the system that helps like bring where the good is, or is that like human made organization?
Yeah, so I think that the Torah is a great example of this, right? Is that this is the answer to the classic question of like, you know, the mitzvahs all have reasons. Why can't I just like study the Torah, study the reasons, and then apply it the way I want, you know? And the answer is, yeah, you could if you're like an Avram Avinu, you know, like who doesn't need a system, but in all likelihood, you're going to fail, you know? So having a system that like ensures that this is enforced and is tied to a reality of mishpat is going to be your best bet. And the Torah is your best bet for living a successful life as a human being in that way, you know? But I was applying the idea even to areas outside of Torah, let's say like classroom management, you know, like teaching, right? So like, it's very easy for a teacher to say, well, I'm going to give each student what they need and just assess each of the needs as they come up. That's very nice to say, but if you don't have any sort of system, then it's going to easily spiral out of control, or you're going to miss things or let things fall through the crack. So coming up with a mishpat system is going to be best for you implementing tzedakah in a classroom. So it
reminds me of Moshe sitting and judging like the people all day, and then Yitro coming in, like we need organization.
That's an ironic example because he was trying to do mishpat without a mishpat system, right? He was trying, you know, and for him, tzedakah was mishpat. I know that sounds like a mind-bending sentence, but like for him, Moshe was the lawgiver, you know, and for him, what did the people need? They needed guidance in Torah. So that was his tzedakah, but he was trying to do it without a system of mishpat until Yisro came along. That's actually a great example. I'm just going to add that here. Example is Moshe without pre-Yisro's advice. Yeah, Sarah?
Matt, can you explain a little bit more how this relates to like a little bit through tzedakah and then a lot with mishpat? Like how, like with the two?
Good question.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Right.
Thank you.
I either I did not come up with an idea when I wrote this for that part, or I forgot it. So let's think it through. How is a little bit through tzedakah better than a lot without mishpat? I think what I'm saying is that if you engage in tzedakah on a small scale, I'm not talking like quantitatively a little bit, on a small scale, and train yourself in that derech of, I'm going to relate to this area of my life by giving everything what it's due, but I'll have a system for it. That if you cultivate the ability to do that, then you'll be able to do it more and more and more and more, and you'll get better results in all areas. But if you attempt to manage large amounts of resources that you have without a system, thinking that you're just going to be able to wing it by aiming for tzedakah without mishpat, then you'll lose everything because it can't last, and it's going to descend into ineffectiveness pretty quickly. And the nature of a system that is ineffective is it's going to stop yielding.
So would you say that like when it's referring to like a lot of produce, it's actually referring to tzedakah in that way?
How do you mean? Which kind of tzedakah, righteousness or charity?
Oh, okay. I guess I could apply it to both. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm trying to stick with the righteousness thing, and and I guess like a good example of this would be, you know, again, let's take Isaiah's idea of the agricultural gifts for the poor, right? Or Shemitah, of letting the land lie fallow, and so both of these are recognition that I'm not the one who owns the land, God's the one who owns the land, and I'm just borrowing it and getting benefit out of it, and I have to align myself with with justice in society, that's giving to the poor, and righteousness in nature, which is not overtaxing the land in ways that it can't handle, and also like part of Shemitah is like returning to the earth, and you're allowed to eat in the 7th year, but you're only allowed to eat wild growth, so like recognizing I am in a sense part of the animal kingdom, and realigning yourself with a proper orientation of man's place in the world. Yeah. Okay, let's in the remaining 9 minutes, let's look at as many of these Meiri interpretations as we can. Okay, so this first one is, I think, like Isaiah's, or those of you who said ethics. Tov, and again, I got the ChatGPT translation down here, but I'm going to translate. Yesh meforshim shehi ha'ar lehizahar min hagzelos v'chamasim. Some people say that this is a warning against theft and robbery. V'hakavana tov ma'at mamon sheikbots b'tzedakah rotlem rabbi yosher mirov tuvos mikubatzos below mishpat rak be'ilbo v'chamas. So better a little bit of money that is acquired with righteousness, meaning uprightness, than a lot of produce that's gathered without justice, meaning through injustice and violence. Okay, so I think you can say the ideas that a lot of you were saying about unjust means. Either it's bad for you, or it's bad for the system, or it's bad, like Anne said, in terms of like you're gonna go further and further and further. Okay, that's idea number 1. Idea number 2, the efshar shehi are harmonis. Okay, this is the one that is reading it a little bit like Ben. I don't know if the idea is the same, but I think he's reading it this way. It's possible that this is a ara harmonis. I don't think this is a good translation. This is mundane advice. Lios ha'adam misader b'hotza'osav u'mechalko devarav b'mishpat. That a person should organize their expenses and conduct their affairs with moderation, not justice, with moderation. Umilas tzedakah munachas lifamim al hahalicha b'kav hayosher. The term righteousness is sometimes used to following the path of b'kav hayosher, the line of uprightness. Kamo mishpat, similar to the word justice. So he's saying it's almost synonymous. Va'amar, and he's saying tov ma'at mamon, better a small amount of wealth, bios balav sham or chosav b'tzimtzum behotza'osav, when its owner estimates his ways with in a conservative manner of expenditure, meaning he saves. Better that than person with a lot of produce who squanders his money and spends it without any without consideration, without any judgment, I'd say. Without any judgment. Rotzlomar bezulas mitzua hadrachim, meaning without moderation, rak bepizur uvder chamaya ushtus, but in a wild and foolish manner. Okay, so let me just go back to what Ben was saying. So Ben was putting it in terms of tzedakah being what is right, and a person who operates based on principles of tzedakah will have values with which they can make decisions about all of their wealth and resources, where someone who's unprincipled won't. Meiri's is not the same as that, but it is close. He's saying that having some system of, again, it's mundane advice, having some system of budgeting, is going to work wonders in terms of preserving your wealth. And someone who's reckless in their spending could start off with a lot of money and end up squandering it all. And you might say, what's the chiddush, right? Like, what's the, you could say, like, isn't this obvious? What's the chiddush? What do you say? I don't think there's only one idea, but. Anyone? I mean, where do you see this? You see this a lot with lottery winners and with professional athletes, right? They get a ton of money, they spend it all, and then they go into poverty, Okay, here's one idea, which is that a person who has a lot of money or produce, etc., can easily fall into the trap of viewing it as infinite, that it can't be depleted or lost. Okay, but if you relate to your money with a strict budget, you'll always be aware of how much you have, and if you temper that with striving for moderation, then you'll preserve, you won't, I guess you won't lose your wealth. So the funny thing about this is, like, it's not even knowing good money managing strategies. It's having a system. I mean, it's very similar to what I was saying, just with a different punchline here. But like, having a system for money at least makes you aware of your money, and does not give you this like let you indulge in this impression or in this fantasy that like it's a limitless resource. So I think that's like a good where people make this mistake with time. People feel that they have infinite time, whereas if you have I'm pointing to my weeks of my life chart, that has all the weeks of your life, and you realize at every step of your life how far you are through your your year and through your life. Not that we ever know when we're going to die, but like, you realize like time is a limited resource, and you don't have infinite time. So it could help with that also. Apply this to time and scare yourself. Yeah, Sarah?
Is it also possible, that if like you apply it to righteousness or piousness, that people people can, decide that they're going to become overly righteous, that you can't really operate in that way without like a system, or a greater, or being
That's
part of a
good.
greater system, where people take on, like, I don't know, chumrah, like my husband was having a conversation with my almost 16-year-old about like, okay, like focusing on chumras, and then how you can like lose sight of halacha, so people can focus on certain things that might seem easy to do, but then you're not focused on things that are harder to do but are halacha.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, that's a good example of the Meiri. Also a good example of mine. My idea. Okay. Let's read. Okay, this is also a common interpretation. Another interpretation is, a little with righteousness refers to giving a little amount of charity to the poor as is proper, in the way of salt preserves wealth by reducing it. I gave a shiur on this in Pirkei Avos 2 years ago, I think. Abundant income without justice would mean giving without giving the proper amount from it, as expressed by our sages. He did not do as he was supposed to do. We're not going to elaborate on that right now. I want to get to this last idea, the derech nister. So this is his allegorical interpretation. Kar l'shleimus hamidos tzedakah mishpat. He calls tzedakah mishpat, that refers to moral perfection of character traits. V'amar shetov ma'at limud im shleimus hamidos. The verse is saying, better to study a little bit of Torah with perfection of midos, meharbos bezulasam, than a lot of Torah study without good midos. Ki chol limud below shleimus hamidos yisbalbel sidro v'yavu mimenu harisa v'giotzeba. Because any learning without perfection of midos will confuse a person's order, okay, and he'll come to harisa is like breaking through, like skipping steps. He says this also. He says, "O pirusho tov lihis lamid ma'ad b'tzedakah." Better to educate yourself a little by little b'tzedakah. Rotzomer b'seder haroi, in the proper order. Okay, this is not a good translation here. To gradually learn with tzedakah, meaning in the proper order, not the proper manner. Then meharbe below seder haroi, then to engage in learning without a proper order. Ki alimud b'bilti seder yashchis haseichel v'yabalbel toeles halimud. Because learning in a manner that's out of order will corrupt the mind and confuse and confound the benefits of learning. So this is interesting. So here again, classic derech nister move is the derech nigla. The normal way we learn Mishlei is about how to attain success in the material world, in the physical world, in the psychological world. But the derech nister is applying it to your soul. So what does it mean to have a little bit or a lot of produce with the soul? It's talking about learning. Learning is the good of the soul. But if you do it without mishpat and tzedakah, meaning without midos, so either you're going to go into areas of learning that you're not ready for because you haven't perfected your midos in a way that you could psychologically handle it, or the midos will detrimentally or you will go about your curriculum and your training out of order. Like you'll skip to advanced metaphysics before you train yourself in how to think, or you'll delve into areas of halacha thinking that you can like arrive at psak when you really don't know how to read a Tosfos, and you'll end up messing up your mind, or going into areas that you're not ready for. So I think that was just a good little sampling of what a Derech Nister could be. Okay, it's 8:30. Let's stop here after we review. I'll try to review everything really quickly. Okay, so we had the first batch of ideas from Isaiah and Ariel, which is talking about the effects of doing tzedakah with your of making money through tzedakah on your personal development, and recognizing that that is the ultimate good that you should be striving for, and no amount of money can offset the harm that you're doing to your own character and your own relationship to tzedakah, to justice. If you no amount of money will make up for that. In other words, I don't care if you give me $1 million. If I'm engaging in an unethical way, then that's going to be harmful for me. And then Ariel's idea, which is that in the very act of money making, if you're looking at where are you getting the real profit from? The real profit is not in making extra money. It's in working on your character and your psyche through engaging in business, seizing every opportunity to do that. All right, then you got Alex and Anne as another pairing here, which is Alex saying that this is talking, and also Sarah's idea, I think it belongs in this cluster here, which is that it's addressing a mentality where a person, well, I guess Sarah's and Alex's are more similar, where you try to justify the means based on the ends, and think that if you're making a lot of money, even though you're using illegal means, it's okay as long as you're giving to tzedakah. But in reality, you're not attached to tzedek, and so you are not really giving tzedakah. Like you're undercutting your entire tzedakah and your relationship to tzedek by doing that, and you're also harming the long-term viability of your business. And you're faking yourself out, because you might be convincing yourself that your intentions are good, but you can't, with something like justice. Justice is not a means to an end; it is an end in itself. So you can't justify it by not by violating it to get there. And then Anne's idea is that if you make a tremendous amount of money through an act of injustice, you're actually setting yourself on a course for destruction, because it's a slippery slope. You're going to rationalize it even more. It's going to become the standard way you do things. Whereas if you make a little bit of money, then you're going to keep those ambitions under control and be able to stick to your values while you continue to slowly build your wealth. And so you're not gonna expose yourself to that risk. Then we have Ayala's idea, which is also, I think, the Meiri's no, it's not the Meiri's idea, is that based on the Rambam's definitions of tzedakah being taking care of everyone's needs, if you do that, it's going to lead to a more stable system, which is going to lead to more benefit and more production and more efficacy, and then it'll be long-term good and better. Whereas if you cut corners and you don't relate to people with justice and you don't take care of people's needs, then the system won't function properly, and people will need to get their needs from elsewhere because they're needs, and that can lead to further problems of people clamoring for their needs. Rifki's idea was about the scarcity mindset, that if you conduct yourself with righteousness, if you have a scarcity mindset, you might try to hoard stuff, and that can actually increase the scarcity mindset, because you're just going to keep hoarding and saving and not have any connection to real resources and real good and what your place is in the system. But if you practice tzedakah as righteousness, or as the mitzvah of tzedakah, it'll orient you towards objective needs, towards what resources are actually out there, and through focusing on your proper place in the system, and that will remove the scarcity mindset and the panic that comes with it, and you'll actually be able to get your resources and use them properly, because that's what's on your radar. Reza was saying that it is talking about having clarity in what good you are producing in the world and how you're doing it, and if that spirals out of control, then you expose yourself to a lot of blind spots and can make a lot of bad decisions and have a false view of what you're doing. Ben's idea is acting based on principles of tzedakah, and that will keep you acting in a principled manner, and give you a framework for making all of these micro decisions in how you relate to your wealth. Whereas if you don't have principles, you'll just get swept up in wherever the wealth takes you in terms of whatever values there are, and who knows where you'll go. You could end up in the mafia. You could end up in the Kardashians. You could end up in all these bad places. And then my idea was, which I'm not convinced fits into the pasuk necessarily. I'm still working on that, but it's really saying tzedek plus mishpat is the way to go. And if you, meaning having, or being oriented towards the natural design of something, but then engaging it through a system. And so if you do that and you start small, that success can grow and that way of thinking can grow, and then you'll get to ultimate success. But if you try to ditch mishpat, you'll end up ditching tzedakah as well. You can't do tzedek without mishpat. You can't perfect yourself without keeping halacha, without keeping the Torah, following the Torah, or at least the odds are very, very small. And Moshe can't even do his tzedakah without Yisro's advice. Meiri's idea number 1 is about the ethics. Meiri's idea number 2 is about having a system for relating to your money and striving for moderation. That will prevent you from squandering it. And the opposite is if you just like spend without paying attention to your money, you'll fantasize that the money is infinite and you can't deplete it. And before you know it, you won't have any money. And then the Meiri's last idea was about learning a little bit, but having perfection of midos will ensure that you stay on the correct path and you learn in the proper order and you don't do anything you're not ready for, and that the learning sticks. But if you don't worry about perfecting your midos and you just try to accumulate learning, the lack of midos will mess up your learning, either in the order that you get into or getting into areas that you're not ready for, or in failing to implement it. Or if you go about learning not in the proper order and you try to skip steps, then that'll throw off your progress. Okay. I think those are all the ideas. That was a lot of ideas. I know we're past our time, so if you have to go, you have to go. But I just want to end off with what I read what I wrote this morning in this morning's What I'm Thinking About post, which is about original ideas in Mishlei. Again, this is very short, which is in this new commentary of Rabbeinu Sheshes. We don't know who this is. I wrote, one of the many reasons I love learning Mishlei is the thrill of discovery. More than any book in Tanakh, Mishlei encourages readers to come up with their own interpretations. Shlomo explicitly states that he wrote this book to teach us how, quote, to analyze parable and allegory, the words of the wise and their riddles. Once a student of Mishlei masters its methodology, they can develop interpretations on par with the greatest commentators. I had never seen any Mishlei commentaries explicitly acknowledge the phenomenon of Mishlei chidushim, of new ideas, until now. I recently bought a new commentary on Mishlei by Rav Sheshes ben Yitzchak, an unknown scholar from the 12th or 13th century Gerona. After a brief invocation, he writes, okay, here's this great thing. It is not far-fetched that at some point a statement of wisdom might be elucidated by the small ones, that's all of us, which had been hidden from the eyes of the great ones, the Gedolim. Even if they were leaders in wisdom, like princes and noblemen, as with gold and abundant pearls and hidden treasures found from time to time, despite their lack of success in their searches, and though many roam seeking but not finding a portion, the hearts of people share a common foundation. Okay, this is very poetic. It's more poetic in Hebrew. I don't know if this translation is good. From the radiance of the intellect, a bright light shines. Though divided by type in thoughts and opinions based on the times and circumstances, power is present in all, even if hidden in their deeds. The line of intellect stretches over their heads, and when a spark ignites in the lowly, they awaken to understand riddles and allegories and stand in the place of great ones. Who knows? Wisdom might disclose its truth to them, which others had doubted. This is not due to their deep study in wisdom, but by chance, in accordance with the will of the cause of all causes. Blessed is he. Let not the lowly one say, how did the seers not see this? And who am I to come after them to tread where they already did? For if one finds the truth, they gain an advocate. And if not, it is no secret that they worked hard and strove. Even if unsuccessful, they are saved by their learning. So what I get out of this is that, it's possible for lowly people like us to find ideas that the meforshim did not find in their hundreds of years of learning Mishlei. And it's not because you're greater than them. It's because there's a lot of chachma out there. And I like how he says, you found it by chance in accordance with the will of God, take from that what lessons from Hashgacha you may, but it's possible for us to get this. And tonight was a good example of that. We got a lot of good ideas, which not all of which are reflected in the meforshim. Okay, sorry we went a little overtime, but not apologizing for learning. Okay, have a good night, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you. Have a great night. Thank you.